For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind. By the might of his inexhaustible armies, 1,000,000 worlds stand against the dark. Yet he is a rotting carcass, the carrion lord of the Imperium, held in life by marvels from the dark age of technology, and the 1,000 souls sacrificed each day so that his may continue to burn. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. It is to suffer an eternity of carnage and slaughter. It is to have cries of anguish and sorrow drowned by the thirsting laughter of dark gods. This is a dark and terrible era where you will find little comfort or hope. Forget the power of technology and science. Forget the promise of progress and advancement. Forget any notion of common humanity or compassion. There is no peace amongst the stars, for in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to ChimiComics. My name is Riley.
I'm Wyatt.
And you're watching Novel Nook. Today we're going to be covering something that Wyatt picked out.
It's been a long time coming.
Jeez.
Because you remember, I have spoken about this series before. And now we will be able to discuss it without Tanner going, gout!
Gout.
Which will be nice.
The gout. So we started on the first book of the Gaunt's Ghosts series. It's a Warhammer 40K property by Dan Abnett. And for our comic fans, Dan Abnett, you know Dan Abnett probably.
Did Teen Titans?
Teen Titans.
Yeah, didn't he do Teen Titans?
He might have done a Titans story.
He did a Titans story.
I've recently, in the Rebirth era, he did Aquaman, which was received pretty well. But it's nice to see that he's doing something else. He's been doing this for a long time, too.
Yeah, and the story we read, called First and Only, was the first book to be published by Black Library, which is now one of the 5th largest publishers in the world. And
I just want to point out how freaking huge this is.
This is an omnibus, and it has 2 short stories in it.
Yeah, we only deal with omnis on this channel.
Yeah, unfortunately, because this book is pretty old, you can't find, they're not in print anymore, so the only way you can get them is an omnibus.
So this has the first 3 books and some short stories in it, but it's only $20 for this.
And that is a very good deal. There's a lot of novel, and it's very, very good.
Yeah, it's like, one thing I wish is that they would put them in single volumes and hardcover. Because, like, when you read a hardcover, you won't, like, crease the spine on it, you know? And you can see I've already kind of trashed it a little bit. But, yeah, the cover art's cool. They've been doing this for the Omnis.
These 2 characters, the man here, this is Commissar Colonel Ibram Gaunt, and this is Colonel Corbec. And we will get into their backstories, details, and all that on this novel.
Gaunt's the main character, obviously, and his whole regiment
is heavily featured.
Is his ghosts, they call them.
That's their nickname.
Corbec is like his second command, and he's one of the ghosts, and he is from the planet Tanith.
Tanith was where the home planet of all the ghosts, and they're named after their planet. Their unit designation is Tanith First, and only is added on, because when they were founded, the enemy forces attacked their planet and destroyed it. And Gaunt had the decision of either leading the men he had to die, basically, because there was no way they could stand against the enemy forces, or take who he could and leave and fight for the Imperium for another day, basically. And he decided for the second option, so a lot of his men now hate him, because they would have much rather died.
And the unique thing is that Ibram is the only ghost that's not from Tanith.
From Tanith, yes.
So,
and he's expected to be their leader.
before we get into it, so the book we're reviewing is called First and Only. Didn't you say that he titled that because he thought he was going to write one book?
This was his first novel he ever wrote, Dan Abnett.
Yeah.
And this was the first Black Library publication. So he didn't know if he had the chops to be a novelist, and they didn't know if the publication was going to do any good. So he, very cheekily, is what he said in the foreword of my version that I read. He says that he titled it First and Only simply because of that. And apparently did very good. There are 15 books in this series.
Yeah.
So,
and I haven't heard any news that he's doing another one, but people are talking about it like it's not the end,
Yeah.
But nothing's been heard yet. But I don't know why I'm worried about it, because I've only read one.
Yeah.
So I've got a ways to go.
And according to Dan, he said in interviews and stuff, this is his favorite stuff to write. And these are his favorite characters he's ever come up with. So I don't see it ending.
Which is understandable, because I can't think of anything, to my knowledge, that he's written in this length.
Mm-hmm.
Like that he's been attached to a story this long. I mean, he's had a few comic runs, but nothing like this in length. And the first one came out in '99. I don't know when the 15th one came out.
It just came out, I think, 2020. I think it just came out last year.
Okay.
So it's fairly recent.
2 decades.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. That's a long time. But, so my version, and I guess you read it too.
I did.
Started
I
out.
have both of these. I have the omnibus, but I also have it originally, the original or special edition that was released, but I have it on digitally, just because I'm a digital plebe.
So we can talk about the short story called A Ghost Return.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote this in 2013 later on, but it
I guess
kind of
before
lets
we
you peek into...
Before we get into it, I read the intro, and that is the intro. Every 40K novel, game, whatever it is, has a variation of that intro to it. So some of the facts here, they are a part of a military operation called the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, and the history being that these worlds were founded by an Imperial saint named Saint Sabbatine, and over the years these worlds were conquered by their archenemy, which are the forces of chaos, and chaos is the antithesis of everything Imperium. It's all about corruption and running on your base passions, and just it basically is an insane way of living and being and worship. And so it is called the archenemy by the Imperium because it's their worst enemy.
The funny thing about the Imperium is they're like super religious, but they worship the Emperor who's been alive for over 10,000 years.
Yeah, so there's this whole thing called the Horus Heresy, where his son Horus decided to turn to chaos, and he fought the Emperor, and Horus died. Yeah, Horus died, but the Emperor was mortally wounded. So, like as I said in the intro, he sits on a golden throne, which keeps him alive and allows him to use his psychic abilities to still help the Imperium as they travel through space by being basically a lighthouse. If you want to think of it that way, is the best way to describe it. But to keep him alive, he needs 1,000 psychic sacrifices every day. And good thing that the Imperium has no shortage of citizens who will...
Good thing,
Yeah.
Untold billions.
Untold billions, yeah. It's honestly in the quadrillions. Like they have no idea. Like, you saw, like, on the planet Pyrites, they have entire swaths of urban that isn't even recorded or anything, and no one in there is recorded as Imperial citizens.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If I had to describe this book series and the Gaunt's Ghosts, it would be Warhammer 40K meets Band of Brothers meets Richard Sharpe, Sharpe's Rifles, and equals Gaunt's Ghosts pretty much. And I stand by that. This book gets a 10 out of 10 for me. I mean, I love it. This is what got me in 40K, really. And I just fell in love with the characters. I care about them. And just everything about the Tanith is cool to me.
So what got you to read this?
Believe it or not, I was in Barnes & Noble, and I have been on Discord and stuff, and I have friends on Discord who were into 40K, and I'd seen the artwork and watched trailers of games and stuff, because, okay, these are pretty cool, and I'll check them out. And I saw some animations, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So, I mean, the miniatures are really expensive, so I'm probably not going to get into that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's a lot of lore and books and stuff. So, I was in Barnes & Noble, and I had done some research. I knew about the Space Marines, and they were pretty cool. But I really was drawn to the Imperial Guard, who, unlike the Space Marines, are just regular human beings.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting in 40K because of their enemies being so much more powerful than regular people. Mm-hmm. And I saw 2 books. There was one called Cadia Stands, which goes over the fall of Cadia, which is one of the bigger events that's happened recently in 40K. And there was an omnibus there called, I can't even remember the name of the omnibus, but it was the some of the later books. It begins with the 8th book in the Gaunt's Ghost series. So I started reading it out of order. Like, you can look it up. Yeah, it's right there.
The Lost?
The Lost. It was the Lost omnibus. And I got that while I was in high school. And I was reading it in class, and I couldn't put it down because it was just, even though I was reading it out of order, it still like pulled me in, and I started learning more about the Tanith and the characters, and just through that, and I was hooked. And I started with the first books and read it all in order, and then I haven't read anything past the Lost, and doing this made me want to reread everything else, so I'm rereading all of it until I finally catch up and get to the last.
So you literally just jumped in the middle.
Yeah, pretty much.
The
funniest thing, the very intro to the first novel, Trader General, there's a thing that long-time readers would have been like, whoa, about. There's a meeting of a bunch of officers, and they're waiting for the Tanith officers, and the reveal is, yes, here he is, Major Go Colia and Commissar Victor Hark. And I'm just like, I thought it was called Gaunt's Ghosts. But I mean, whatever. But I mean, and that novel is really cool because it's the Gaunt, Ron, and other characters are away from the Tanith and away from the big battlefields, and they're sent to a chaos-held planet on an assassination mission. So they're actually doing like commando stuff and stealth and infiltration, like basically using their skills, like what they were meant for. So yeah.
Okay.
It was really cool.
So when you were talking about it on one of the casts, I don't remember which one, but like, was that the first time you had read that one? Like, were you?
That was the first time I had read this one.
Okay, got you. Cool.
Yeah.
So you want to just get into the short story, or
you want to give a rating?
Oh yeah, I give it 10 out of 10. I had a great time. Right now, between books 1 and 2, there's a short story there. It's like 50 pages or so, and it's like a flashback to before Volume 1.
Yeah, before the first book.
So like I'm still going through it. I'm really enjoying what I'm reading. It's definitely a page turner for me. It started off kind of slow for me, but I don't want to hold that against the book because I was just kind of busy and I didn't have a lot of time to read at one time. So I was kind of reading small chunks at first.
And that the short story is pretty slow, and that's what you started with.
Yeah, but like it was a little intimidating, like trying to keep up with all of the characters and the worlds and the different groups of people.
Yeah.
Like Tanith and
Vitrians. Not everyone has a 40K nerd resource.
Yeah.
I literally I was sending him artwork.
Yeah, that helps too to visualize what's going on, you know. Like he was sending me pictures of tanks and the weapons, stuff like that, and the armors. That was cool too. But yeah, once you get past that initial difficulty of like trying
really once you're past part 1, you basically perfectly fine. Like
for the most part.
You're good for the most part. You've learned enough that you can basically move on and be
like
fine.
They'll throw like I want to say probably like 10 characters at you at least that you need to know like pretty well.
Because you have to remember this is all about the Tanith first and only really, and that's a regiment of over 2,000. So.
Yeah. I mean they don't get like that bad, but like you're keeping up with like a platoon, you know. Of guys,
and sometimes they'll just throw a name out there, and then you'll see him again a couple chapters later,
a little bit,
and you'll know, oh, this guy, he's good at sweeping, he's good at tech,
But like you'll be introduced to a Vitrian Dragoon leader,
and that's another regiment. So the Imperial Guard is drawn up from planets all over the Imperium, and each planet usually has their own doctrines and equipment, uniforms, and just way of doing things. And
I know the other books will introduce more, and so I have to remember that too. But it's a good time.
We'll get into it. So the short story, A Ghost Return, starts out with Commissar Gaunt, and at this point he has not met anyone from Tanith. He is still serving as a regular commissar, and commissars are political officers. Their job is to keep up morale and ensure obedience and loyalty to the Imperium all across the Imperium. They're in the Imperial Guard regiments, they're on Navy ships, they even are assigned to planetary governors. So
I would liken it kind of to a warrant officer. Like they have certain privileges that the other people don't.
Such as they're able to summarily execute anyone at any time. Really one thing you'll learn about 40K, no group are the good guys.
It's true.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. There's so much going on. Like the Empire is so big that you couldn't hope to keep up with all of that.
And it's so bloated with bureaucracy that it can't keep up with itself.
Yeah.
It's often said that orders will come 100 years too late to a battlefront from Terra.
Yeah.
So.
Which, I mean, like, that frees you up to tell so many stories that way.
They do, and that's why we have so many novels.
There's a ton.
So, Commissar Gaunt here is with the regiment he's always been with. So, he started as a cadet commissar known as the Boy, and then he was made full commissar, and he was stuck with this unit. They're called the Hyrkans, and they're really, good soldiers. They use artillery and wear armor, and they're pretty regimented, and they're just very good basic line soldiers. And they have a mission here. So like I was telling about the Sabbat World's Crusade, it has been gifted to a man called Slato, and he really admired Saint Sabbat and wanted to take back these worlds for the Imperium in the honor of her memory. And so the High Lords said, okay, made him a war master, and gave him a huge force of ships, regiments, and a couple legions of the Space Marines, and even some Titans from the Adeptus Mechanicus, which are the biggest war machines on the ground. And so he went to war, and the Hyrkans went with him. And this takes place during the first assault of that crusade. And Gaunt and the Hyrkans, a fire team led by a major, get ordered to find a shrine in the Undercity that they're assaulting. So they're moving through the dark, these tunnels, and it's shaking because there's artillery being shelled and fired over. And they're moving through, and they're arguing, this is probably worthless, I don't think we'll even find a shrine here. And it really goes into the military, because Gaunt realizes that the Major has made a mistake and gotten them lost. And
he doesn't want to, just
snub
completely
him.
overthrow him.
Because Gaunt has memorized the entire route, and he just points out, well, if we go this way and then turn, we'll be there. And he's like, you didn't have to pull out your map. And he's like, I just remembered it from this morning, sir. And
you'll find that, Ibram Gaunt reminds me a lot of Wyatt. like Wyatt, but with restraint.
Yeah. Thank you. That is complimentary.
You just be like, yeah, I know the whole freaking map. And there's one point where he's thinking about the authority to overthrow him, and he's like, I will do it, but I shouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's why, but with restraint.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're going through that tunnel, and then eventually, they're in the tunnel because these people, these archaeologists, right? They call out and they're like, hey, we need some help. We found something. We need somebody to blow a hole in some rock reed.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing down there. They find these people, and they go to that that hole that they want him to blow.
Yeah, there's like a plug into the hole that's blocking it, and it's something pretty massive and something that can't be moved, so they need to blow into it.
So they're trying to drill into it and put some dynamite sticks in it. But then as they're drilling...
Gaunt notices some things because he is a... I'm looking for the line. He says, I'm an overeducated, overprivileged Scaldem boy. That's why. Yeah. And he's noticing that they didn't translate this writing on the wall. And if these were real archaeologists, they would have been all over that, because they're all over the little details like that. That's just how scholarly people are. Yeah. But they're not really paying much attention to that.
He has a hunch that something's off, but everyone's like, well, let's just blow this thing out of here.
Quickly. You don't really
He's like, no, I don't think this is a good idea.
And... So
and the guy drilling says something's wrong too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he catches something on. This is what makes Gaunt like fully act. Yeah. He's drilling into the walls so they can place charges in, and he says, "My scanner's got something back here," and he starts crushing the like wax or whatever that the walls are made out of, and he reaches in, and everyone's like, "What are you doing, Gaunt? We just had to blow it open." Yeah. And he's like, he says, "Let me do this," and he pulls out by the throne. And it's a helmet. It's an Astartes, a Space Marine helmet from the Iron Snakes chapter. And
he knows that because he's an overeducated, privileged column.
Exactly. And he says that that he needs to call it into command, and says to their Vox officer.
This is the artifact.
No, he says to the Vox officer, and Vox is radio, pretty much, and says, "Tell them that we will wait for the bombardment to end, if need be." Yeah. And he comes in and says, "Sir, the bombardment ended 3 hours ago, but the chamber is still shaking." And they realize that whatever's plugging that hole was trapped something down there. And that's when
the helmet was left there as a warning.
Yeah, the major who was with him and was about to snub Gaunt and basically cussed him out at the whole time. And that's when Riley was talking about Gaunt's thinking of the exact words he needs to say to take over as of commissariat code. And when they realized this, the major immediately realized that he done fucked up. Yeah. And that's when the scholar people attack. One of them steals a weapon from one of the guardsmen and opens fire, and they have a firefight and they all get killed, and they check the body of the guy who first opened fire and find a chaos tattoo on him, and they realized that these were actually enemies, and they had posed as scholars and sent this message out so they could get the explosives to open whatever this is up. Yeah. And so...
that would have been very bad.
Yeah, and the major, Sitzel was his name, he speaks to Gaunt, and he goes, "Gaunt, what about and this is at the end after everything has been kind of settled, what about our altercation? I want to," and Gaunt shakes his head. "It was a difficult situation. We both did what we thought best. My report will say so. But for the good of the Imperium, remember," said Gaunt. "For the Hyrcan regiment, at least, some things are better left buried."
Yep.
And then he says, "I think we should pull back from this area." And Gaunt nods. "Look, I appreciate your attitude, Gaunt. I showed you disrespect and I'm sorry. I think you've got a fine career ahead of you. No thanks to old bastards like me. Maybe one day you'll end up serving alongside a major who'll show you the proper respect, eh?"
Maybe.
"I'm sure I will, sir," said Ibram Gaunt.
But no, sadly.
And one cool thing, now, that was the short story, and that just shows a little bit of about Gaunt's prior service. Mm-hmm. And every book begins with an excerpt from history of the later Imperial Crusades, and I love this. I love in-universe documents. The High Lords of Terra, lauding the great War Master Slato's efforts on Kulan, tasked him with raising a Crusade force to liberate the Sabbat worlds, a cluster of nearly 100 inhabited systems on the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus. From a massive fleet deployment, nearly 1 billion Imperial Guard advanced into the Sabbat world, supported by forces of the Adeptus Astartes and the Adeptus Mechanicus, with whom Slato had formed comparative pacts. After 10 hard-fought years of dogged advance, Slato's great victory came at Balhat, where he opened the way to drive a wedge into the heart of the Sabbat worlds. But there Slato fell. Bickering and rivalry then beset his officers as they vied to take his place. Lord High Militant General Hector Dravir was an obvious successor, but Slato himself had chosen the younger commander, Makarov. With Makarov as War Master, the Crusade forces pushed on into its second decade, and deeper into the Sabbat worlds, facing theaters of war that began to make Balhat seem like a mere opening skirmish.
So that's important to remember. This whole story revolves around Makarov and that whole exchange of
Dravir.
power. Like
Yeah.
when he promoted Makaroth to War Master.
Yeah, Militant Dravir is not happy, and he is using every resource that a Lord High Militant, which is a lot, to usurp Makaroth.
Yeah, and so Makaroth is like a younger guy. Like he was promoted over Dravir, and that's why.
That's what really pisses Dravir off.
That's why he's so mad about it, because they didn't think he deserved it, but that's who Slater picked.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so the first part of the first anomaly is strange because it's a naval part. We are with two small interceptor warships or fighters. They're more like warships in my opinion because of how they're crewed. And
you don't find out how this relates to the rest of the story until like almost the end.
Yeah, pretty much. So they are flying out, and each one has a psyker, and the Imperium doesn't trust much technology. They have Vox, but that's not secure. So what they use for secure communications is psychers will relay messages over space to each other. And they have a psyker on board to intercept any messages they come across. And he finds one and he goes to intercept. And he's using the most of his power he's ever probably used, because this one is coded Vermilion. And that's important because that is the highest level of classification the Imperium has. So this is very important. And the Psyker gets the message and sends it on, and the Interceptors get attacked by some Chaos Fighters, way too many, and they ended up getting destroyed. But the Astropath, as he was called, the Psyker, is able to send the message over, and he knows that this must not get to Dravir. So he passes it on, and this...
They basically sacrificed themselves just to get a message out.
Exactly, because they could have ran away from where they were getting assaulted, but they decided not to. And it was very cool, because he still killed a couple with his guns.
Yeah, he took some with him.
And that's you'll see a lot of that in 40K.
I'm sure.
Yeah, they'll take them with them.
For the good of the Emperor.
For the good of the Emperor, indeed. So the next part is a memory, and all the flashbacks are called a memory.
Between every part is a memory, too.
And they really center on Gaunt.
Mm-hmm.
So Durandara, 20 years earlier. This one has Commissar General Delane Akhtar. He's the chief political officer of the Hyrcan regiments, so all of them.
Yeah.
And he is watching over his men.
This is when Gaunt is a cadet.
Yeah, he's known as the boy among the Hyrcans.
Yeah.
He's basically their mascot. And Akhtar is making comparisons because he also mentions Colonel Dravir, who will later become Lord High Militant Dravir, the antagonist of this book. Mm-hmm. And going over how Dravir doesn't care about the lives of his men and will happily waste them to get to victory, whereas Akhtar does care about the lives of his men and will try to keep them alive as best as possible and still win.
And you can tell Gaunt takes a lot.
Yes, he does. Gaunt was under Akhtar, and Akhtar was basically his real father figure after his father had passed away, and he had become a commissar cadet. He was raised by Akhtar after that and trained, and all of his ideals were passed on. So, let's see. Yeah, so he goes for Gaunt, and Gaunt is helping some of the other soldiers load artillery and stuff, and he gets told, hey, the General Commissar wants you, and he's like, okay, did you hear me? I heard you. And and he does, and Akhtar wants him to lead a mission, and this is the first time he's ever been put in command of an actual mission. Mm-hmm. And he does it, and he succeeds. He picks the men from the 4th Brigade, and Tannhaus is a reoccurring character. He's basically Gaunt's friend in the Hyrcan regiments.
And Akhtar is like impressed by the picks he has.
Good choices, Ibram. Prove me right. That's what he said. And so they go in, and they get pinned down, and Gaunt says, give me grenades, and then calls up a man who, he's a javelin champion, so he's got a good arm. Gaunt ties 2 belts of grenades together, pulls the pins, give it to this man with the good arm, and he tosses it, and they blow the hell out of the enemy they're fighting. And he just...
the 5th.
Yeah, he blows the 5th out of... What is 5th? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How do people know?
So he says, put this where it counts. He blows them all up. And the find the rebel leader, and he's dead, and Gaunt signals that, hey, they won. But after they win, they
bring a girl.
Yeah, Gaunt notices they've captured a woman, or a girl, and she is raving, and
she's possessed.
Yeah, she's basically possessed by the warp, or she's a psyker. She's a psyker and being possessed by the warp, or even the Emperor, who knows. And she tells Gaunt something. She says, "There will be 7, she said suddenly, speaking surprisingly perfect High Gothic with no trace of the local accent. 7 stones of power. Cut them and you will be free. Do not kill them, but first you must find your ghost." And Gaunt says, "Wait, what do you mean, 7 stones? Ghost?" Her eyes rolled back pupilless. The cracked old voice bubbled out of her quivering lips. "The warp knows you, Ibram." And he steps back as he was singing. He goes, "How did you know my name?" And she doesn't answer, and they take her away.
That's going to be important later.
Yeah, it is. And Gaunt is just, "What was that about?" And Tanith is just like, "Rubbish is what it is. Forget it, sir." "Right, forget it, right." But Gaunt never did.
So, like, she was let me see that.
Yeah.
Oh, also, when these possessed people, they always tell you, like, their words never match their lips. I always, like, find that disturbing.
It is.
Like,
40K isn't just all the battles and stuff. There's actually a lot of metaphysical stuff going on. Like, as they fight chaos, like, people... like when chaos stuff starts happening, they'll start having migraines and blood running out of their noses just because of these are hostile powers that were not made for mortals to interfere with.
Do we ever get to like view things from that viewpoint?
I'm sure there's books and stuff from Chaos's viewpoint. That'd be very hard to write.
Read any?
No.
Okay.
I'm a good Imperial citizen.
Oh my god. Okay.
So yes, here's probably my favorite intro to any military setting ever, with part 2, Fortress Binary, a Forge World. Forge Worlds in the Imperium are vitally important, because that's where all the guns and stuff get made. So when one gets under threat, the Imperium goes a-running to try and retake it as intact as possible. So we have Corbec waking up, and he's acknowledging some of the men and their billets. They're all in trenches. This is trench warfare, I think World War I. And he's taking note of the Tanith with him. Tanith are light infantry, so they're not really meant to be on the line here, but they are. They don't wear much armor, and their main thing is they wear camo cloaks, and they're very good at stealth. So
And scouting.
And scouting, yes. So Colm walks up to his friend Larkin, and Larkin is mixing something that resembles calf, which is coffee. And he's like, "Oh, you want some?" And he gives it to him, and he's like, "This is ghastly." In his mind, he's just, good stuff.
Yeah.
And then, so this is the intro to Corbec. And then we get a intro to the next officer of the Ghost, Ron. And Ron is walking through the trenches, and then a man has an episode. A rat was getting into his rations, and he starts firing on full auto at this rat. And in fact, that's a hazard in a war zone. So Ron finds him, beats him up, basically knocks him out, and then says, "Arrange a firing squad." So Colm Corbec has the men's respect as he moves through the trenches. Ron has their fear.
Can I point out, like, they don't have anything like that in the rest of the novel, where they're like, "Yeah, just kill our old man right there.
Yeah.
Just kill him." Like, you don't see that at
Well,
all.
this is Ron's leadership style.
I mean, I guess.
So yeah, and then there's Trooper Bragg. And Trooper Bragg...
Try again, Bragg.
Yes. He is the biggest ghost. He always lumbers around with an autocannon and a missile launcher. And he always misses the first shot, but he tries again and always hits.
He just shoots enough to hit a target eventually.
They call him Try Again because of his terrible aim. He'd been on picket all night, and he is very tired. And he runs into Trooper Catherine and knocks him down, and Bragg hauls him up because he's so big. And Catherine is one of the youngest in the regiment. And no harm done, Try. Get your Billet. And so yeah, Catherine ducks down, and we go on with his point of view. And he enters the officer's dugout, which is where Gaunt is.
And he notices first Bryn Milo, and Bryn Milo isn't a guardsman. He's a civilian who escaped the fall of Tanith with the rest of them, and he now serves as Gaunt's adjutant. So he's basically his secretary, gets his everything he needs, that sort of thing.
He's Cadet Ibram Gaunt.
He's basically Cadet Ibram Gaunt now.
Yeah.
So Catherine gives Gaunt the orders of the day from command. He's relaying them to him, and Gaunt's like, sit down and have some breakfast. I'm sure Bryn has made enough for two, and it's eggs and ham. And Catherine's like, really, sir? And he's like, okay. And he starts eating, and then he just starts swarming it down because he's like, this is the best thing I've had in 60 days. Mm-hmm. And it's so good that Gaunt could tell me my mother was killed by orcs, and I wouldn't have mattered. I wouldn't have cared. And Milo, after they talk a bit, Milo comes and says, sir? What is it, Bryn? I think there's an attack coming. Catherine just chuckles, how could you know? And then Gaunt cuts him off and says, somehow Milo sensed each attack so far before it's come. Each one seems he has a gift for anticipating shellfire. Perhaps it's as young he is. Gaunt cooked a wry grin at Catherine. Do you want to argue, eh? Catherine was about to answer when the first whale of shells came in.
Yeah.
So
like, then you see Dravir in this, and he is like, he's commanding the whole attack, right? Mm-hmm. And him and, is it Flynn's?
Colonel Flynn's.
Okay, so Flynn's has like a vendetta with Ibram Gaunt.
Yeah, Flynn's is the colonel of the 1st Jantine Regiment, Jantine Patricians. They're noble, high-born guardsmen, elite, they wear heavy armor, they're stormtroopers, and they're all noble blood, that sort of thing. So they view the savage Tanith with their tattoos and long hair as barbarian savages, not worth...
It's kind of like the Romans and the
auxiliaries,
like the Celtics.
Yeah, that's basically how you would run.
I would compare those two kind of things. Or, I mean, I guess like, what was that during the time of the Crusaders? Right?
Yeah.
Weren't they around the same time? Who was fighting each other? I think it was.
Crusaders.
It was the English people and the Nordics.
Vikings.
Yeah.
Vikings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. Yeah. Like royal versus savage.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're just watching over the battle, and Dravir goes, who are those? Those ants dying over there. And Flynn's is like, I believe the Tanith have that part of trench. Supported by the Votrian Dragoons, my lord. And he's like, you don't really like them, do you, Flint? He's like, no, I do not.
He's like, all right, send them out there first.
Yeah, and gives them the order that they are not to retreat. They are to move and take as far as they can.
And then Flynn's, you take your tanks and you go around them, and you take all the glory for the victory while they're dying.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So they do that, and what happens is like once the Tanith advance, they get trapped in a big bombardment of artillery, and it just keeps raining down behind them.
Yeah, they have advanced far enough, and they've all been scattered away.
Yeah.
And so there's 3 groups we get the point of view of. There's Gaunt and the men he's grouped up with, and then there's Corbec, and he has 300 ghosts with him, and then there's Ron, and he has a small team with him as well. And there's also another regiment nearby, and that's the Votrian Dragoons, and they have their own unique armor. It's almost made of mica glass, and it's like medieval scale armor. And they can like flip the scales to the other side, and it's like a matte black, so they have a stealth mode. Basically, they're really cool. Yeah.
But so the chaos enemy is like raining down this continuous artillery.
There's only one way forward.
Yeah,
that's forward.
It's trapping them. It's trapping them from like retreating, so they just have to keep moving forward.
And they're moving through the enemy's trenches, and they notice that most of them have been abandoned. Like the enemy has fallen back far more than they should have, because they attacked the Imperial lines, and Gaunt...
They're luring them in.
Gaunt rose up and said, Men of Tanith, who wants to live forever? And they all went over the top. And now they're on the other side of the bombardment, and they notice that we're not meeting any enemy resistance. And with Corbec's group, as they're going through the trenches, they're seeing all these like shrines, and these shrines hurt their eyes to look at because they're shrines to chaos and the dark gods. So he's just blowing them away with his las pistol every time he sees one. But one blows up and shrapnel gets caught onto one of the ghosts, like into his neck area.
Yeah.
But he puts it down. And he's like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. No, you're not.
Yeah. Later on, they begin hearing drums, and it's not like there's no sort of rhythm or anything with these drums. It's just random and
chaotic.
A cacophony. A cacophony is what I would describe it.
Yeah.
And they find these big warehouses filled with them, and the drums, not leather, not any sort of fabric or anything, human skin.
Yeah.
Wonder where they got it. Don't want to know.
It's leather, but it's
human.
It's not cow.
Not cow leather. Human.
Meanwhile, like the patricians are like out on the sideline. They're kind of waiting.
They're waiting for a break in the bombardment.
They're looking at the artillery bombardment, and they're just kind of sitting there waiting for it to dissipate.
Yeah, so they can move forward. And
so they're not doing anything right now.
Yeah, Corbec decides that we need to blow up these drums because it's such a bad thing. Like it's heretical. It's heretical in his mind. And so
blasphemous.
He bring up a flamer, and a flamethrower is going to go over it. But then the flamer explodes. At first, when I first read this, I thought that
the drum got him.
I thought the drums actually blew him up. I was like, oh my god!
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Chaos could do that, but no, they realized that shot came from before. The guy who got shrapnel from a chaos sigil in him was there, and he's been corrupted. And so he shot his flame tank and blew him up. And the flamer, he shot it out at other ghosts and caught them on fire. And they shoot him, and they think he's down. But then he morphs into a being of pure chaos.
A giant, skeleton.
Yeah, and it's just grotesque. It's disgusting. It's nightmarish. And the men of Tanith, these brave soldiers who went over the top and faced the enemy and survived bombardment, are on their knees, and they're literally, most of them can't move because they are so terrified of what has just happened, because one of them has just been morphed into this monster. And one of them, however, I can't remember who it was.
Well, this is Ron's group, right?
Oh no, this is
happens to.
We skipped a memory, I think.
We can throw it in.
Yeah. So. What was that?
I thought it was Ron's group.
No, they're not till later, I don't believe.
Oh no, this is Corbec.
Yeah, this is Corbec.
Okay.
And he, one of his men does manage to hit him with a rocket launcher and blow him away. And save everyone.
That's right.
There's also a part where we go back to No Man's Land, and we find that Trooper Catherine has fallen into a hole with a Vitrian Dragoon. And
he got separated from Ron because they got hit by some artillery, and it kind of blew them different ways, and Catherine didn't link up with them again.
Yeah.
So he's with this Vitrian.
They're being shelled all around him. So he talks to this Vitrian, and he tells the story of Tanith, and you learn a bit about the culture, about how they were woodworkers and how beautiful the planet was.
Yeah. That
sort of thing. There's also a memory in this part as well, and it talks about how Oktar, Commissar General Oktar, so Gaunt's father figure and mentor, passed away. So they had won a big victory against orcs, and the orcs had apparently poisoned the food supplies and everything, and they had found that out, and they thought they had cleared everything, but during a victory celebration, some guys, they found one bottle of very high quality wine, and as soon as some of the men took a sip, they dropped dead, and Oktar took but a single sip and went, and because they had already dropped dead, but that was enough. It took him it took 8 days for him to die, and the last thing he does is he takes Gaunt's hand and makes him full commissar. And he says, "Know from now you are Commissar Ibram Gaunt, appointed to the extremis of the field of the commissarial office to watch over the Hurricane regiments. Fetch a clerk who must record my authority in this matter and your oath." And Oktar willed himself to live for 17 minutes more, as an administrative clerk was found and proper oath ceremony observed. He died clutching Commissar Gaunt's hands in his bony, sweat-oiled claws, because he has been, he is aged fast because of this poison.
Yeah.
That's how terrible it is. So, yeah. So, Corbec, after this, really goes on the warpath against these drums. So he starts blowing them all to hell. And Gaunt realizes, he's like, that's not artillery fire. And he is linked up with the Vertrian leader, Colonel Zoran?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
sorry.
Colonel Zoran. Okay. And
he's really cool too.
yeah, he is.
And so Gaunt and Zoran, their men are all fighting, and they start shooting at some Chaos troopers, and
Well, this is later on. They realize that Gaunt realizes that Corbec is the kind to go off on his own and not think first, and he's blowing up all these drums. The spotters, the artillery spotters, are noticing, hey, these aren't our shells. Let's cut the bombardment back a bit and kill whoever's blowing these drums up. And so Gaunt gets on the horn and calls Corbec and says, Corbec, stop it. You're going to die. and Corbec realizes his mistake, and he realizes, run! Get the hell out of here! And they mad dash and link up with Gaunt. And Ron had already linked up with Corbec as well at this point. Mm-hmm. And so they all come together and decide that, hey, we still got to move forward because this bombardment, they're doing something to keep us from moving in. So we need to find out what they're doing, put a stop to it. And Gaunt noticed, I noticed you had your men set your las guns to full charge. And Zoran says, it is written in the Vitrian art of war, make your first blow sure enough to kill, and there will be no need for a second.
But they're running out of ammo. And he says,
that's
please tell your men to
later
on.
on. Yeah, that happened later.
You just were talking about that.
Yeah, but that's where it was right here.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen till later.
Anyway, he tells them to put them at half charge because these troopers don't take that much to kill.
Yeah.
And they need to conserve ammo. So that's what they do. But
they move forward.
They link up with Corbec
Mm-hmm.
And find him. I believe Ron is still like on his own.
No, Ron had linked up with Corbec by then.
Did he? Okay.
Yep. So they move in and keep on, and they end up in a train tunnel where they have mag rails going, and they find that these are all connected to ammo storehouses.
Yep.
And most of them are already empty because they've been shelling so much.
And they're automatic too.
Yeah.
Like there's no one loading up the ammo and stuff. It's all automated, and it's all being brought to the central artillery barrage.
Mm-hmm. And they realize that they can stop one of these mag trains with the Vitrian's armor because of what it's made of. It's non-conductive or whatever. So they stop they get a trooper Domer, who was a engineer back on Tanith. He realizes this, and he asked, I find this really cool, he asked for some Vitrian armor, and Gaunt notices, he's like, I'm sure Zoran will call for a volunteer, but Zoran takes off his own armor and hands it in right there and says, will this do? Yes, it'll do nicely.
Yeah. They basically throw it on the rail like a blanket, and it stops it.
Mm-hmm. And once it's stopped, all of the men load up on it, and they go into battle. And they arrive at the center of the enemy's forces, and where they've all loading up ammo and whatnot.
And they find a big monolith there also. And you find out that this is one of those 7 stones that girl was talking
Exactly.
about. And she says, cut them but don't kill them. So they find out that they need to cut the link between the stones.
And not just blow them up.
Yeah, don't blow them up because that'll release a bunch of chaos energy and
Mm-hmm.
probably kill them all.
So yeah, they use Vitrian armor for that as well, but I don't think it worked. So then they had to do something.
I think they wrapped it around it to try to cut the link, but they ended up like just blowing some charges around it and make it topple over.
Yeah, they also, while they're fighting, a Chaos Space Marine comes in, and Space Marines are genetically altered super soldiers. They have backup organs, like they have multiple hearts and lungs and stuff, so they are hard to kill. And
Gaunt ends up fighting one-on-one with one.
With a chainsaw sword. And he plunges it in, and it's revving, but the Marine is still standing tall, about to kill him. But then full charge lasgun shots start slamming into its helmet and blows its head off and finally kills it.
Mm-hmm.
And Gaunt turns around and sees that it's a Vitrian Dragoon, and he's like, I'm sorry, Commissar, but I set my gun back to full charge. And Gaunt goes, noted, excused, good work. And they continue on. I love the humor. The humor is perfect.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. And so, yeah, they are. They cut the power from the 7 stones, as it said, and I'm just looking here.
There's elevator paint. But like when they do that, all of the chaos troopers on top of them, they know something's up and they come down and chase after them. I think something's about to blow up too, right?
Yeah, they doing that was gonna make the entire thing that they were setting up a ritual is what they were doing, and it's cutting it off instead of just blowing it up. Turn that power back on them, so it did blow them up, but I don't think destroying the. I think it wouldn't cause it to blow up, but destroying one of them wouldn't stop the ritual. So
yeah. So like they're trying to hightail it out of there, and they jump back on the little train, or no, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
Just run, I think.
No, they get on the train, I believe, and.
Well, anyway, they're trying to get out of that tunnel.
Yeah, and then we see back with Catherine and the Vitrian, and they have a cool conversation, like I said. Catherine goes, Feth, take me. They finally... Ha! Someone just won something. Because they see the entire skiv and the enemy land blows up, and Lord High Militant General Revere put down his cup and watched with faint curiosity as it rattled on the cart. And he notices that all his enemy begins to explode. And he doesn't even go anything of victory or anything. He just says to his adjutant, prepare my transport for embarkation. It seems we're done here. So, bastard. And back with Colonel Flint's, his convoy, that when the...
He's angry.
Yeah, back when the bombardment was going to target Corbec, who were blowing up the drums, that caused a break in it and allowed Flint's to roll his tanks through. And so he sees the enemy he was going to face and win in glory, and he goes... No. No!
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So they win the day.
Yep. And Gaunt's like, that girl, Dan, whatever her name was, had been right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then
A memory.
yeah.
Yep. And this was Gaunt at the Schola
kid.
Progenium. And this is, that's the school that Commissars, Tempestus, Scions, basically the elite of the Imperium that aren't Astartes go for training when they're children. Mostly it's the children of dead Imperial officers who get chosen.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Want me to pause it, or you just edit this out?
No, keep going. I'll be right back.
Okay. So, we meet Scholar Blenner, and he is basically polishing the floor with a toothbrush. He's being punished. And Gaunt asks him what is he being punished for, and he says that he... I believe it was on a live fire exercise where he shot too well or something is what he says. I'll look here. And...
Yes.
Yeah, he asked them... Blenner asked Gaunt how did they die and about his parents. And Gaunt's like, well, my mother died shortly after I was born. They won't tell me how my father died.
Yeah.
And Blenner goes, my father was a space marine. And he died against the Tyranids. And my mother, after it happened, killed herself out of love.
Right.
Not what happened. His parents were clerks who got virus bombed by the Imperium because there were gene stealers on their planet. So, yeah, not so noble. Not so noble, but still. And Gaunt gets picked up by the deputy master, but he gets sent to the high master, so basically the head of the entire Schola. And this Schola is like a very noble one, like not just any other Schola. It's a very well-regarded one.
It's also very kind, too, it seems.
And he is High Master Boniface, and he's he lost his legs, his left arm, and half of his face. And he's on a wheeled brass chair that supported a suspension field.
I want to point out their love for brass in this universe.
Brass and gold.
They love brass. Like, a lot of things are made of brass.
Mm-hmm. They like it. The Emperor loves gold, and other people, they make do with brass. So he's talking to Ibram, and he's questioning him on all these books he has read, and Gaunt is saying the title, the chapter, the page that these happened, until it gets to, like, he asks him questions. He says, the meaning of war, and Gaunt replies eagerly, is victory. Lord Milton Gresh, Memoirs, Chapter 9. How may I ask the Emperor what he owes me, when all I owe is to the Golden Throne, and by duty I will repay? The Spears of Longing by Inquisitor Ravenor, Volume 3? Volume 2, actually. But yeah, he's very nice, and Gaunt asks him how his father dies, and he asks, why would you want to know? And then he tells about Scholar Blenner, because he's like, well, Scholar Blenner asked, and he knew how his died. Yeah, Scholar Blenner's family was killed when the world was virus bombed. He always has a fertile imagination. Yeah. And then his use of live rounds in training, the cause of his punishment, and Scholar Blenner was discovered painting rude remarks about the Deputy High Master on the walls of the latrine. That is the cause of his punishment duty.
Yeah. And he asks about his father, and he says, that's classified.
Yeah. You're smiling, Gaunt. Why? No real reason, High Master, after we're hearing about what Blenner actually did. So yeah, and like I said, that's classified. So part 4. Cracia City, Pirates, or Pirates, as Ryan likes to call it. I like to call Pirates. So the Ghosts are on leave, on holiday, as it were. They're on this very nice world that's...
Cold planet.
Yeah, it's a cold planet, but the zones that they are relegated to are heated and very advanced technology in the streets.
The city is heated.
Yeah, like there's a force field above them that keeps the snow from piling up, and the streets themselves have heat wafting up from them, so it's very comfortable.
But then everything outside of that is very poor.
They call them cold zones because they have none of this, and they're not supposed to go there because they are not really under planetary control. It's all vile criminals. Yeah. And no police or arbites, as they're called.
Like, but come on, there's a cool bar out there I want to go to.
Yeah, that's what I think Bragg is talking to Corbec.
And all right, fine.
He's like, we've been talking, and Corbec's like, who's we? Larks and me, and Varl and Blaine.
Meanwhile, Corbec is just out there at a cafe enjoying a nice brew.
And Corbec decides to, okay, I suppose I do not. Tell me what this place is, the one you're talking about. I have an errand or two to run. I'll meet you there later. Just stay out of trouble. So Corbec and a lot of the ghosts have decided to head out into the cold zone because these are soldiers who just went through a hellish campaign, and they are going to cut loose.
Meanwhile, Ibram is at a hotel or something, at a fancy party.
The Polar Imperial, one of the better hotels, and
a bunch of officers.
Yeah, and his old friend Blenner is here too, and he's describing the destruction of an enemy battleship, and he's drunk, he's very good at telling a story. Yes. So he's very, very, he's the life of the party. Yeah. And Gaunt gets a message. He looks up and says that. There's a boy, sir. A boy in reception who wishes to speak with you. Boy? He said to give you this. And he holds out a Tanith, silver Tanith ear loop, suspiciously between velveted, so a earring, basically. And Gaunt goes, and it's Milo. And he's like, I thought you were going with the others. And he has a Vox cast for Gaunt. And it's gibberish, and then he identifies his thumbprint, and it says, Ibram, your only friend in area close enough to assist. Go to 1034 Needle Shadow Boulevard. Use old identifier. Treasure to be had, Vermilion treasure, Farid. Farid is the name of an Imperial spy Gaunt's worked with in the past, and he trusts him with his life. He's a very good friend of Gaunt's. Mm-hmm. And so Gaunt calls for Milo to... This is funny. He says a task to perform. You open the dissect again and press the white room to expunge the message. Can you drive? He asked Milo. Can I? And the boy said excitedly. And Gaunt calmed his bright-eyed enthusiasm with a flat patting motion with his hand. Go down to the motor pool and scare us up some transport. A staff car. Tell them I sent you. So they get a half-track car.
Yeah.
This is the first thing Milo's going to drive, a half-track.
Yeah.
And
the back of it is like tank treads.
Yeah.
And the front is some wheels.
Yep.
It's weird.
And that's a real thing. They use it in World War II. But
Really?
Yeah.
When did they use
The
that?
Germans use them. They're mechanized infantry.
Of course.
The
Of course.
U.S. had one, the M3.
I've never seen it before.
I'll show you later.
They're
Blender,
doing that.
Yeah, Blender shows up as well, and
He goes with them.
He's drunk because he's like, "Hey, Ibram, I'm not letting you out of my sight. We only get to meet each other every 10 years." And Ibram's like,
Let me go. Okay, fine, but
he's
shut
like-
up.
He's like, "You can come." He is just behave and be quiet. So this next part, we are greeted with the sight of a stripper, and there is Major Ron.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's what they're. She's there. And he is drinking Voner Hebsheptical Gil. I'll just call him Gil. And Gil is huge. And Ron knows that he can outdrink himself, that Gil can outdrink him. But Ron took some drugs that kept him from getting drunk, so he is perfectly fine. And after it all, when he proves himself,
They take him out back.
yeah, and it's
like,
funny
hey,
because the stripper is like, she's removing the last garment and then notices that no one is looking at her because everyone's looking at this off-worlder talking to this huge criminal boss, and she gets kind of pissed off at that. I found it funny.
But they go out back, like outside.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, here's the product. And it's
Yeah,
like a bunch of booze.
Yeah, and he's like-
magazines and just anything you'd want to give some
Cigarettes,
soldiers.
yeah, and yep, I have the money here. My assistant, Mr. Fagor, and Fagor walks up, pulls out a last pistol, shoots Gil, and they hop into the truck, which has everything in it, and drive away. And then they get they start getting
This whole
chased.
chapter is so chaotic.
Yeah. So at the wheel, Ron saw Fagor fall in the rear view scope and panicked as the attacker swung into the cab beside him. "Major," Corbec said. "Corbec, you here?" "I'd keep your eyes on the road if I were you," Corbec said, glancing back. "I think Gil's men are after a word with you." The truck raced on down the snowy street. Behind it came 4 angry limousines. "Faith," Major Ron said.
So they're running, and then they get thrown off the road
Next,
into a
we'll just
warehouse.
We'll just follow along. Or do you just want to finish them off?
I just finished that part.
Okay.
So they have a standoff in a warehouse.
It's funny because they're outnumbered by 20,
Yeah.
and Corbec talking to Ron, he's like, "It's you, me, and Fagor. We're master stealthers. They just turned the lights off for us. We can handle this." And Corbec's also like, "I thought I'd come and help you out. Plus, I'm a better shot than that fat white Fagor." And downs a car.
Yeah.
So they
It doesn't even actually happen.
they
It
just
says
show that everyone
they
local.
talked about it for years.
Yeah.
About how the 3 off-worlders took out a whole...
whole criminal gang. So Tanith soldiers in a warehouse is basically like
And
Batman.
they said only 24 shots were fired for 24 men,
Yeah.
all dead. No more, no less. A local legend.
Yep. Never face a Tanith in the dark.
So they get the contraband.
But Ron was going to sell it because Ron's an asshole. And Corbec, though, being a good colonel, decides to just give it away. And they're having fun at this Cold Zone bar that they find Larks and Bragg are all. They're all with some painted ladies. And then they go out back and they're having their own fun. And with the booze, not the ladies. Because Corbec's there, they bring the booze. Yeah, that. So, back with Gaunt. Gaunt says, it has Milo just, firstly, he says, "Milo, slow down. You're not trying to break a land speed record."
But then, like, they show up to that hotel thing that they said.
But no, it's just this rundown apartment building, yeah.
Yes.
And he goes in and meets an old guy and gives his code, Eagle Shard, and Gaunt's heart sank because it isn't Farid, but he gives him a crystal. And this crystal is coded vermilion. It has the message that the Psyker at the very beginning had intercepted. And
then immediately that guy is murdered.
Yeah, 3 stormtroopers.
And then the SWAT troopers come in through the window.
Exactly, like that gift. That's exactly how it is. And Gaunt, all he has, he realized he wasn't armed, so Milo hands him his Tanith knife. But Gaunt picks up the gun, and it's apparently the Halo 1 Magnum. Because it's just a hand cannon. It doesn't have many bullets, but he's like blowing holes in the wall and just taking out these troopers.
Oh, yeah.
And he gets away. Well, no, he almost gets killed, but then Blenner apparently decided to come in behind him, a last pistol shot, because Blenner, even drunk, is carrying. He packing. And
kills the guy on the stairs.
Yeah. He says something, too. Got tired of waiting. Looks like you needed a hand anyway, Ibram. And they drive back, and as they're driving back, they realize that there's a roadblock in front of them, and this whole section is hilarious. They realize that there's a roadblock, and it's from Major Brocus with the Jantine patricians, and they are there to beat Commissar Gaunt to death. Yeah. And Blenner is like, Graham, you never were a diplomat. These men want blood. Insulting them isn't going to help their mood. I'm dealing with this, Vay. No, you're not. I am. Major, if it's a fight you want, I won't disappoint you. A moment, please. Blenner said, holding up a finger. He turned to Mila and whispered, Boy, just how fast can you drive this buggy? Fast enough. And I know exactly where to go. After the consultation with my colleagues, Major Brocus, I can now safely say, Bird in hell, you shit-eating dog. And they leap, he pushes Gaunt back in, and they take off, and Gaunt goes, so glad I left that to you, Vay. I don't think I would have been that diplomatic. So they're getting chased, and Milo knows exactly where to go. He pulls up at the bar where all the Tanith are, and they're enjoying the contraband that Ron and Corbec have given.
And they toss him a bottle.
Yeah, they pull in, skid, Gaunt hops out, they toss him a bottle and goes, Lads, I could use a hand. And Major Brocus and his lackeys show up, and then they see, oh, there's some ghosts here. No problem. Oh, wait, it's 200 of them. And so, yeah, they're foiled there.
I followed your plans.
Yeah, he says, now we have him. He stopped at that place ahead. Brocus flexed his hand and struck it with his baton. Then he saw the crowds of jeering ghosts around the drive-in bay. 100, 200. Oh, balls. He managed. The bar was almost empty, and it was nearly dawn. So, Gaunt and Blenner had a hell of a time with the Tanith here on this thing. And Gaunt decides to tell Corbec a little bit about what is going on. First and last, first and only. And they cheers and everything like that.
Yep. A good time.
Yep. And next, that's the end of the leave section, and we get another memory. And this is Gaunt as a child, like he's a young child, a boy, and he talks about how his uncle Dersius, who's a general with the Jantine patricians.
Not actually his uncle.
Yeah, he calls him Uncle Dersius.
A family friend.
Yeah. How he made him all these toys and always was giving him gifts and just doting on him, and how he had the chef at his house, his noble house, Auric, is always also helping him out and stuff. And Uncle Dersius shows up and has another gift for him. He gives him his signal ring, and this is how officers in the Guard unlock certain communications. And a general would have a very high level of classification. This will be important later. So Dersius gives him the ring to distract him, but he says, Gaunt, I have to tell you about your father. So this is when Dersius is telling him about his father getting killed. And that's what happens in that section.
Yeah.
So the next part is part 5 on the Imperium. That's what it's called.
On the way of the ship and stuff.
Yeah, the Absalom. And Gaunt reminisces a bit about Farid and their past, and he decides to go for a walk. He's on board a ship, and this isn't just the regular ship he's usually on, which is a frigate called the Navarre. This is a Adeptus Mechanica ship. It's 16 kilometers long, and has enough space for basically half the Crusade. Not really, but there's a lot of regiments it can carry.
Yeah.
And the Jantine are also aboard. So Gaunt decides to take a walk.
The bad guys.
Yeah. He goes to a place that you can look at the warp, basically just the raw warp, which will drive men insane. And then a crewman shows up and attacks him, and there's this fight scene, and Gaunt notices that this crewman isn't really a hold of himself. Like, someone is controlling him, and it's a psyker, so now you have a psyker in the mix. Gaunt manages to almost die, and then Corbec is led there by Milo Ex Machina all the time, and Corbec had an unregistered firearm. So while they are in transit aboard a tech priest vessel, they have to turn in all their weapons because they see, even though they're like, okay, you guys took a Forge World back for us, we still see you as nothing more than guard savages, so we don't trust you to have any actual weapons.
Mm-hmm.
But so an alarm goes off because they...
Well, the reason is because they don't want them to fire and breach the hull and all of them freaking die. So
Yeah.
that's a good excuse.
Yeah, that's true. So Corbec fires anyway, kills the agent trying to kill Gaunt, and then some naval troopers show up, and Gaunt basically diffuses the entire situation because he's a commissar, and that means he has special privileges. And so the warrant officer there is like, oh, I didn't know it was you, sir, because Gaunt is bleeding and almost very heavily beat up. And so he took him for just a regular guard colonel because he's not wearing his uniform, his commissar greatcoat and cap and everything. So he tells him that he was attacked and everything, and yeah.
He says, all right, you can patch him up, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, they go back to the Tanith Billet, their barracks, and Dordan, we meet him. He is the chief medic of the Tanith. He's a pretty cool guy.
He's an old man.
He is. He's the oldest in the Tanith. He's so old, actually, that he actually delivered Corbec when he was... he delivered him when he was born. So he's old.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's old as shit. And Dordan notes that they don't really have many supplies in this section of the ship where he set up his medic station. He doesn't really trust them because he doesn't know how old they are and if they're fresh or whatever. So they get
him patched up for the most part. And then they're like, all right, we need to find out, who tried to kill me and what's going on here. And he also needs to find out
what is on the crystal.
What's on the crystal, yeah. He needs to find a way to read it. And later on, he's like digging through his things, and he pulls out a little signet ring that Dersius gave him as a gift.
As I mentioned before.
And he uses that to try to decode the crystal. And it doesn't work, of course, because the codes are too old. So he plans to go to the shipmaster, the captain, and create a distraction there. So
and they find out, they come up with this very grand plan. So the Jantine aboard are threats, so Gaunt decides to use their rivalry to his advantage. He orders Ron to form a guard group, and they're going to guard every entrance into their own section.
They're using that too. The Jantines are. Like, that's why they attacked him. They're like, hey, we have a rivalry. We can just use that as an excuse. But really, they're trying to get to that crystal.
Yeah. So while Ron is doing that, Gaunt has a big meeting with every other officer, and he relays to them about the crystal and about how this is big, and he needs to know if they can trust them. And the guys who is the most loyal to the Emperor, like most devout, he's actually the first one to be like, we're with you, Commissar. Because, he's asking them to be against their direct superior, General Dravir. And they get this plan, and they find out that Zoran and the Vitrian Dragoons are also aboard. So Gaunt is, after he looked through and discovered that his ring can't open, Zoran goes up and he shares that he also knows Farid, and that he's also a friend in this network. So Gaunt grabs him and brings him inside privately. He's like, you better talk now. I need to know I can trust you, because you don't say that lightly. Because he doesn't know he can trust and everything. So they talk and everything, and they come up with a plan. And Gaunt goes, "Okay, this is what we'll do," and punches him in the face. Report that. So while that's happening, the Jantine attack Ron, and they brutally kill 3 ghosts, wound Fager and some others, and kidnap Ron. And this is when we are introduced to a very scary individual, Inquisitor Haldane, who is on Dravir's side. He's a psyker, very powerful psyker. He causes Flynn's to piss himself by making him see his own rotting corpse in the future, because psyker powers are powerful and fucky. So 4th degree warp fuckery.
His plan is to use Ron to get to Ibram Gaunt.
Yeah. So he's getting into his mind using the psychers, trying to turn him into a pawn.
He's implanting a place for him to take control of him.
So the ghost plan is he tells Corbec to arrange a counter raid onto the Jantine after this. And they need supplies for their wounded, Fager among them. So Dordan, Catherine, Bragg, and Milo go to the ship's actual medical center and their storeroom so they can get the actual supplies they need, the fresh ones. And Commissar Gaunt and Colonel Zorin end up on the bridge, and they talk about how the punch that Gaunt punched him was because he thought that the Vertrans were the ones who attacked, but it was actually the Jantine. They blame it all on the Jantine. And Zorin ends up joining in on Gaunt's side, and Gaunt just really tries to piss off the captain.
Yeah, they're like, why don't you do something about this? Murder's going on your ship. You need to do something
They're losing passengers, and the captain, it talks about how he has been plugged into the ship watching every system, and now he isn't. And he's putting his undivided attention on them, and Gaunt gets the captain to agree to let his medic into the supply room. And so Dordan, Bragg, and Catherine are waved in, and while Dordan and Bragg are grabbing Dordan and
Bragg and
it is Bragg. Bragg and Dordan go to grab medical supplies, but Bryn and Catherine go to this computer system, and they're going to get the modern codes. Yeah. And while they're doing that, a Navy trooper shows up, and they fight, and he shoots a bit and misses, and Bragg comes and just folds him because Bragg is huge. And they go running out with the supplies and the new codes, and they get to the door, and he goes, Dordan puts on his best acting and goes, "Wait, there's a Jantine in there. He attacked us. I think your men went after him, but they got him. Please hurry." And they're like, "Okay, we'll get him," and they run away. And Catherine repeats that. "What was that about?" And Dordan's like, "I was the secretary of the Tanith Magnum players. My Prince Takeoff was very well regarded." And they all laugh about that.
One thing I forgot to mention: the captains of ships in this universe, they're
this
like,
one. Not all of them are like this, but
well, I mean, a lot of them are like they're directly plugged into the ship. Like they control it with like their body and stuff. And this captain, it says he's 300 kilos of just flab.
Yeah.
and he hasn't moved.
He hasn't lifted his back off the seat in 15 months.
Yeah. And they're just describing him. He's grotesque. I texted Wyatt and I said, "Wow, I didn't know they included their fan base in the Warhammer universe."
And I
That's
said,
so cool.
spoken by a recent 40K fan.
It's true.
Yeah.
You gotta make fun of yourself sometimes.
So we flash back to Ron and the chief medic of the Jantine is addressing him, and that's when when Haldane comes in and is going to start messing with him. And we had Tanner read this part. And the medic is like, "You can't touch any of my patients. I don't care who you are." And he just makes a gesture and cuts off his head with psychic force. And it's from the medic's point of view. So he's like, he wondered what happened for the rest of his life. So 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gavin Gartel suddenly found himself staring at his booted toes. It took the rest of his life for him to realize that something was wrong. Only when his headless body fell onto the deck next to him did he realize that his head cut. Bastard. No. Friends, clear that up, would you?
That was brutal.
Yep.
So they convince the captain that the patricians are on the warpath and need to be stopped, and Flynn sends his guards around that area away, and apparently McCole, who's the chief scout, best in the Tanith, Corbec, Larkin, they've infiltrated the Jantine barracks. They took out some men and found their own personal firearms, the ones that aren't standard issue, so they didn't have to turn them in because they weren't on registry. So Larkin now has a bolt-action rifle, a very powerful exotic one, and they also have a shotgun. So they move in and they go to rescue Ron. And Haldane turns and is about to screw them all, but then he gets shot through the neck. And Larks just go, "Can we go now?" Because he does not want to be there. So they end up getting back, and the Dordan is able to heal Fager and Ron because they now have
some decent
supplies.
And they're able to try to decode the crystal now.
Yep. And they get a chart, a location, and this is also called, we failed to mention, the next campaign they're going on is a place called the Menzanoid system. And there's two targets. There's the Menzanoid Alpha, I believe.
Sigma.
Menzanoid Sigma.
And Epsilon.
And Sigma is the main chaos-held planet in this system, and that's the one that you will get the most glory. No one wants to go to Epsilon because it's a dark place of depression, and they don't know what's there. They have no real intelligence. So Gaunt even says no one wants Epsilon. No one wants to die.
Yeah.
But then they realize that, hey, the prize they are after is on Menzoid Epsilon.
Yes. So
he volunteers the Ghost for that front.
Yep. So, they get it because Farid is like pulling strings behind the scenes to get him there.
Mm-hmm. They notice that he makes that he volunteers for it and thinks, okay, so that's probably
and
where
he gets the Vitrians there too.
Yeah, he does. And he had done that before as well to get the Vitrians on the same ship, so they had some help from them. So the next part is the memory.
I'm wondering if he was the one that put him on Fortis Binary too.
That is also a good theory
because they were there with him too. That's how they met up.
Mm-hmm.
I bet he did.
That's that's very probable. So the next memory is on Ked, and this is 16 years earlier. So here we see General Dersius, and he is leading his Jantine patricians, all in their tanks. They have Chimera APCs, Lehman Russ tanks, Hellhounds, which are flame tanks, half-tracks. And they are basically going against some very primitive rebels who want to be independent. And he notes that they don't really want to be here very much longer because there isn't any glory here. They could be here 20 years fighting guerrillas. So they need to wrap this up fast. So he decides to just start gunning down villages because they'll finish it quicker. So he has got all of these tanks and all these vehicles, and he does note that the next place has a Vox. It's just an animal camp, basically. They have just tents, and there's some animals that they ride into battle. And he notes that there's a Vox line and says, hey, if they weren't rebels, they wouldn't need that. Mm-hmm. So they envelop them and completely wipe them out. And then, the next morning, just before sunset, I should say, he notices that there's some reinforcements coming, and he knew that Gaunt was now a commissar with these new reinforcements, the Hurricanes. And so, it's fun because Gaunt calls into them, and he speaks Jantine combat cant, so he knows their codes. So he's like, oh, it is Gaunt. I'm so happy. I'll see my little nephew. Yeah. And he even says, well, it will be good to see the boy again, despite everything. So Gaunt pulls out, and Dersius descends to meet him, and he says he hardly recognized the man who stepped up to meet him. Gaunt was grown, tall, powerful, thin of face, his eyes as steady and penetrating as targeting lasers. The black uniform, storm coat, cap, and an Imperial Commissar suited him. And he's like, how long has it been, Ibram? And he's like, I'm so proud of you. And then Ibram says, I know what happened on Kentar. I know that for fear of your own career, my father died. And we've learned that Brocus, the major who we've run into before, the one who tried to beat up Gaunt, was Dersius' adjutant, and he tells Gaunt to back off. But Major Tannhaus and Sergeant Clef of the Hurricanes stood ready to second Gaunt. So they're about to have some very Guard is about to fight Guard. But then Gaunt speaks that he's a commissar, so he has authority to dispense justice wherever he sees fit.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes justice for his father. So he challenges Dursius basically right here. And they have a battle with blades. Chainsaw blades. Chain swords. And I love how Abnett did this, because he knows that these are heavy, so you can't really parry with them. So Gaunt has to like reverse the flow of his chain to when he blocks.
Reverse the polarity of the neutron flow.
Do that and cause Dursius' blade to bounce off, and Dursius gets Gaunt across the stomach, and it's a ghastly wound. But Gaunt does the impossible. And there was a look of almost unbearable surprise on Dursius' face as Gaunt's chainsword stabbed into his sternum, because you're not supposed to stab with a chainsword when you're regular human space marines do it all the time. And, and so Dursius is basically and just chainsawed to death.
Yeah.
And Gaunt falls to his knees, clutching his belly together as warm blood sputtered through the messy gut wound. He was blacking out as Tanith stopped.
You are avenged, Father.
Yes.
Yep. Cool stuff.
Yep.
Now we're on Minnesota Epsilon.
No one wanted Epsilon. No one wanted to die.
Yeah, just read the whole part 6.
Honestly, I did pretty well on that.
Honestly.
I did pretty well on that intro. Maybe I should do audiobooks.
Jeez.
So they land on Minnesota Epsilon, and this is really cool.
On Epsilon, there's 3 targets.
Yeah.
So there's Primaris, Secundus, and Tertius.
Tertius.
I think it's Tertius.
Is it?
Yeah.
This intro is pretty cool because you see all the drop ships landing and they're setting up camps and all the tanks are coming off, and it's like a full force coming down, and the ghosts just walk out on their own, basically, away from all this for the most important target.
Primaris,
yes.
Yeah.
And they're heading to Primaris, and there's a cool shot where Gaunt is looking at the target at the top of a hill, and he turns behind.
A shot. See? You see the shot? Cool shot. I'm joking.
There's a scene where Gaunt is on top of a hill, and he's looking at the target, and he notes that he turns around and looks, and he notes that he's looking at 2,000 Tanith guardsmen, but he can't actually see any of them because they're all blending in with their clothes.
Yeah, that's cool.
So he orders to move forward.
So, like, to overview the campaign on Epsilon, so Dravir is, like, leading the campaign because he knows that, like, hey, Gaunt's going to lead us to the treasure, so we'll just follow him. So he is, like, managing all 3 of the targets.
But he's only really focused on Primaris.
He sends Flynn's to follow Gaunt on Primaris. So they're driving forward to Primaris, and there's a big tower later on that they come across, and there's towers everywhere. Mm-hmm. But the Secundus group comes, like, they're driving
into the target, and the Lord Militant in charge, it goes over his accomplishments. He decided to leave his command Leviathan and join a tank and lead from the very front, and he breaches through the walls, and the towers all around them come alive with chaos energy. They have an energy field connecting to between the towers, and anyone caught in these fields gets blown up.
They all start getting nosebleeds, and their vision's kind of foggy, and so the towers all link up together in a big, like, force field wall type thing,
and it clusters them.
Vaporize everyone.
It vaporizes anyone near it or gets caught in it, and it cuts them off from each other. And Chaos troops are teleported on top of the towers with heavy weapons, so they're free to shoot down. So Secundus's attack is routed. He is able to, the Lord Militant, even though he dies and most of his troops die, he's able to get a message out and say, "The towers are death! The towers are death!" And that is warning enough for target Primaris and target Tertius.
Tertius, yeah.
Tertius.
Tertius is like, they hear about it and they're able to, like, kind of save half their forces because they hear from Secundus.
So before...
And then Primaris, hears it, and they're able to
Corbec hears it, and he immediately starts ordering his troops to target the towers, and they do, and they're able to take out most of them. Before the Gaunt leads a team into the tunnels, because that's where the map points to go into these tunnels and find whatever the treasure is. And before they go in, though, a Chimera shows up, and Gaunt also left behind one of his platoons as a rear guard. And there's a code word. If you meet anyone coming that is hostile, send on the box Ghostmaker. Mm-hmm. And they say that there's a Chimera here, and they want to come see you. It's a tactical officer from War Master Makarov's staff, and he lets them through, and it turns out to be Farid. Farid is finally coming face to face with Gaunt, and he has some troopers of his own, and they join this mission into the tunnels. Mm-hmm. So it's Gaunt, Ron, Dordan, Catherine, Domer, Baru, McCall, Farid, and his own troopers. He has
3 troopers.
Yeah, his 3 bodyguards. Yeah.
But they always have their visors on. They never show their faces.
Yeah. They don't really socialize much, but it's said that they're highly skilled. Like, they send one up with McCall, and McCall is like an unnaturally gifted stealther, and he says that the guy's pretty good with him. Like, they're scouting ahead, and this place is very grotesque tunnels. Like, it's so dark, and the darkness is sapping the energy from their lamp packs. Mm-hmm. So their flashlights basically are going out faster than they can replace them. Mm-hmm. And they later find out that that's also draining their ammunition, their las packs they have.
Yeah.
So while they're doing that, Corbec is leading the main assault on the target, and Blaine is leading the platoon as their rear guard. And they keep moving. Gaunt and his team keep moving through the tunnels, and Blaine sees, we got Jantine coming. They don't look happy, and he looks at his men and goes, and then they start taking fire. And he says, don't shoot until I give the order. We're going to let them close in. And so the Jantine are heading up after the Ghost, and they start using artillery, some light artillery, and Blaine notes that they aren't actually targeting them. They're targeting in front of them to make foxholes and cover for their advance. And notice how, despite everything, these are still elite troops. They're noble, they are very well regarded, they're very good fighters. So the Tanith platoon of 50 men goes against 1,000.
Yeah. And
Flint's ends up ordering, after 300 of them die, he orders everyone to charge and just use mass numbers to win the day. So the 50 ghosts are able to kill 100 more before they all die in their last stand. But they are able to get the code word they used, Ghostmaker, out. And so they are dead, unfortunately. But they took out 400 out of 1,000, 50 men. So that's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So Flint's is ordered by Inquisitor Haldane, who, remember how we captured Ron and messed with him. He knows where Gaunt is, and he has a pawn. He keeps saying he has a pawn with Gaunt.
He's still barely alive.
Yeah. So Flint's is told by Dravir, who knows about this, to go into the tunnels. So Flint's takes a team and goes in there, a fire team, just not as many as Gaunt took. And he leaves Brocus in command, and they are ordered to... this is the logic Dravir uses. So Target Primaris has been breached by these Tanith. That must have been because of chaos. They must have turned. So, because no fortune wouldn't smile on them like this. So you are to kill them and the enemy. Yeah. And Flint's is very happy about this. And Brocus, indeed, very happy about this.
Did you mention that Corbec was moving forward?
Yeah, Corbec while they're
split off with a small team into the tunnel. So the Jantines are going to be going after Corbec's group. And Corbec's group kind of kept going on. I think they're trying to destroy more towers.
They're trying to get into the target.
Yeah.
Target Primaris. And the enemy are using these very, very powerful barb guns, is what they're called. They fire these propelled barbs that, if it hits a man, it blows half of him off.
Yeah.
Torso up is gone.
And if it misses, it'll bounce off some rocks and shred you anyway. So.
One catch is Corbec, and he's using painkillers the entire battle to stay on his feet and keep with the men.
One cool thing that happens, because Corbec was able to think quickly and have them destroy those towers, they're still trying to connect to each other.
Yeah, they fizzle.
They end up blowing up the towers themselves.
Yeah, they
self-destruct.
they blow back onto the Chaos forces, and
And-
Corbec notes that it did more damage than him and his heavy weapons could do in like
yeah.
weeks
Yeah.
of the constant firing.
Yeah, so that helped them a lot.
Mhm.
I did most of the work for them. And at this point, Gaunt's group is like almost through there. They had to get into a firefight with some Chaos troopers.
And Domore, who was the one who came up with the idea way back on Fortis Binary to use the Vitrian armor to stop the train and all that, he gets shot in the eyes. Like he loses his eyes, and he was their main sweeper, and it's very grisly wound. So
It's very sad.
yeah, it is very sad. They keep going, however, and they get to the center where they need to go, and they're talking. They're like, well, what are we gonna do? Like, they're about to rush in, then they realize, wait, there's sigils on the floor. There's something, traps probably.
Mm-hmm.
And Gaunt is about to sweep himself, but Domer is the sweeper, and he volunteers even though he's blind.
Yeah.
And I mean, all he needs is he can move by
His
hearing
headphones,
because
yeah.
he's using a minesweeper basically, like a World War II minesweeper.
Yeah.
And
So he does it.
yeah, but he has a safety line with him, and the way it's moving though is making them scared because they're afraid it'll trip something. So they're like, detach your safety line, and when he does, he almost drops his other stuff because it's very awkward trying to move around with all this gear on. And Gaunt goes, stop, and walks out to where he is and fixes it, and he goes with him the rest of the way, and they clear a path. So they're able to move in, and that's when they find out that this is a standard. I'm going to look it up because I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
STC. Standard template.
Creator.
A standard template constructor.
Instructor. Okay.
And these things they basically construct things out of nothing. They're basically bullshit of the highest order. And
It's like a 3D printer.
yeah. And
But they're all configured to a certain thing.
Yeah. Farid talks about how 10 years ago they found an intact SDC, and it made knives it made blades, and the blades were lighter and better, and they would cut through things way better than any other type of blades. And over 10 legions of the Astartes are using them, and a whole bunch of Imperial Guard as well.
But that was a very big discovery because
and
they never found one intact.
Yeah, and that was blades. This one creates men of iron, and way back in the dark age of technology, the age of technology, when humanity was super advanced and there wasn't all this terrible war and everything, they relied a lot on this technology, and that technology ended up rebelling in the War of Machines. So the men of iron are heretical, not to be used, to be destroyed, but men are still greedy. So Dravir is planning on using all of these men of iron in order to take over the Crusade. His goal is to usurp Makarov and take over the Crusade. Gaunt, of course, notes that this is terrible and they need to destroy it, but Farid is reluctant to destroy it. He wants to use it as well. And it is revealed that Haldane is about to use his pawn to ensure that Gaunt doesn't destroy it. And Ron doesn't actually shoot at him. It's not Ron. Ron isn't the pawn. Farid is. Apparently Haldane got to Farid a long time ago and has been constantly using him as a pawn. So Farid opens fire on Gaunt, but Ron shoots Farid with one of those barb guns he got off of one of the Chaos Troopers and blows him away. And they also take out Farid's bodyguards and the yay.
I just turned this into a mukbang.
Yeah, rations. They when Ron kills Haldane, the psychic backlash of it makes Inquisitor Haldane blow up like a nuke, and he blows up the command center with Dravir. So that problem is solved now.
Don't mind me.
Yeah, don't mind Riley. He's just eating his oh.
So where were we?
I just talked about. Oh, we have cookies. I was talking about Dravir just got killed when Haldane blew up.
Oh yeah. That was glorious.
Yes, it was.
I enjoyed that. So you already talked about Farid then, I guess.
Yeah, I mentioned how he is.
You mentioned how he got half his body blown to bits.
Yeah, I did.
I mentioned that.
Quite sad that.
Yep. Poor Farid.
It makes me wonder how much Haldane had control over him, like if he was actually acting how he would have. Because it says when he starts to try to shoot at Gaunt that he has black eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But they're able to set some charges on the machine and make their way out of there. Takes them over 4 hours to get out.
Yeah, before they were able to do the machine, when they shot Farid, he knocked into the main control of the STC and it started creating men of iron, and it woke all the men of iron that had already created up. But apparently an STC, being on a chaos-held world for thousands of years, corrupts it. So this men of iron is a grotesque monster and almost kills them, but they're able to take it down. But it's creating more of them, so they run like hell. They run like Feth. And get out of there. But before they exit, Gaunt knows that Dorden and Domor aren't with them. And he goes, "You were the last in line, trooper. You were supposed to pass. If they passed you, you were supposed to know." He's like, "They didn't pass me," Sarah Catherine says.
They didn't.
Yep.
Oh, forgot to mention that Flynn's went in after them because he was going to get revenge on Gaunt.
No, I mentioned that.
Okay.
Yeah, Flynn's.
So Gaunt goes back to look for those two, and he finds Domor laying out in the open with a med kit next to him, alone, and he goes to help him, and he gets ambushed by 3 Jantines. He's able to kick one of them off a cliff.
Into a pool of grotesque water.
Yeah. And so he dies, and then he's fighting those guys off, and Flynn's comes out, and he's like, "I am going to, he's like, I'm going to kill you." And he's like, "Why? We need to get out of here. We're all going to die." He's like, "I don't care about that."
Yeah.
And he's holding the medic hostage.
Yeah, he's holding Dorden hostage, and Dorden's like, "Oh, please kill me. I won't have to listen to him anymore."
Yeah, he just doesn't care.
Yeah. He's old. He's seen it all.
But, so Flynn's like, "Fine," and shoots him right in the head. And so Gaunt attacks him. They start fighting. He's like, "Why are you doing this?" And he's like, "To avenge my father."
Yeah, so.
Dursius.
Yes, Dursius was Flynn's father, and apparently Flynn's was very nobleborn and had a bunch of titles to his name, but now that Dursius's betrayal was revealed, all that got stripped from him, and he had to start as a foot slogger and change his name.
Yeah. So that really fleshed out his motivation against Gaunt, which I enjoyed. So they fight, and Gaunt kills him. And it turns out that medic is still alive because their guns have been sapped so much from the dark caves that it just kind of grazed him.
And he also
shot
Gaunt.
Gaunt on the chest too. So they're getting out of there.
The Jantine who are about to attack the Ghost and Corbec, they get killed by the Vertrians. So when Gaunt told Blaine to send the code word out, Ghostmaker, he sent a message to the Vertrians, and they showed up to back the Ghost up, and they killed Brocus and all the patricians, basically. And Brocus goes out hard, because he kills apparently 44 dragoons in that entire fight. So
Yeah.
they come back and they help the Ghost, and then they get ordered to retreat. And Corbec goes, "Okay, we'll cover, and you guys lead us out." And they do. And everything ends pretty well. Dravir is dead. Haldane is dead. They have blown up the STC, the corrupted one. And the last section of the book is
I don't know if you mentioned this, but Haldane's whole motivation was so he was still fighting for the Empire, But he wanted to do it in a way that like was kind of a gray area where he would use the chaos weapons against them. So that was why he wanted to grab this device so he could use the Men of Iron.
And Gaunt tells Corbec that, Corbec asked why he didn't want to use the Men of Iron himself, and he said he's impressed that he found out that it would have been corrupted, but Gaunt says, no, that wasn't it. Someone told me what to do, Colonel. It was a long time ago, So
it ends with a memory.
Mm-hmm. The same girl that he saw in that set about the 7 stones, he meets her again. An Inquisitor wants him to talk to her because she says that she will only speak to Gaunt. And he's still a boy at this time, still a cadet. Still Cadet Commissar Gaunt. So he goes and meets with her. They speak. They're a bit flirty, and then she has a full psychic episode and gets a grotesque voice and freaks him out. He's cowering in the corner trying to get out, and the Inquisitor, the door is locked. She's probably doing that.
Let me out.
Yeah.
Let me out.
Yeah, basically. And she tells him all about the ghost, and yeah. Yeah.
She talks about the 7 stones of power again, and
Gaunt manages to. It's funny because he manages to whisper, "What do you want from me?" What? She says, "Your life." And he's like, "Get away from me." And then he asks her a question just to see how much she does. He goes, "Well, I make commissar." She's like, "Of course." And then he says. She says, "What I told you, there will be 7 stones of power. Cut them, and you will be free. Do not kill them, but first you must find your ghost." And he says, "What the Feth does that mean?" "What does Feth mean?" She replied, pointing. Feth is the Tanith wood god, and it's used as a curse by the Tanith themselves. So Gaunt has no idea what Feth is at this point. So his future is impinging on you, Ibram. Ghost, ghost, ghost. And... Yep, the warp knows you, and she says, "Ibram, there will come a day, far off, far away, when something colored in vermilion will be the most valuable thing you have ever known. Chase it, find it. Others will seek it, and you will defend it in blood, the blood of your ghost. And remember this, Ibram. Ibram, please, so many will die if you don't. So many, so very many. Destroy it. You must destroy it. The vermilion thing, destroy it. It makes iron without souls. You're insane. Iron without souls. Get off me. Worlds will die, a war master will die. Don't let any of them have it. Any of them. It is not a matter of the wrong hands. All will be wrong hands. No one has the right to use it. Destroy it, Ibram. Please." And basically after that, she starts foaming at the mouth. And, oh, wait, no. First, he asks her one thing. He says, "If you're truly gifted, why don't you tell me something real? Something I might actually want to know. Like how did my father die?" In her own voice, she began, and this is, she switches back, actually. She switches back to the kind girl he was talking to, kind of flirty with. She says, "Your father, you were his first and his only son. First and only." Yep. She said it. She said the title. And Kentar. It was on Kentar.
What is this, some kind of first and only?
Yeah. Kentar. It was on Kentar. Dersius was commanding the main force, and your father was leading the elite strike, and that's the end of the book. So that lets us know how Gaunt knew how his father died and why he wanted to challenge Dersius.
Yeah. That was a great story.
Yeah, it is. We went way long.
We did. If you're still here, we hope you enjoyed it.
Sorry, this is just one of my favorite series, and I probably went way too in detail.
Probably. It's all right.
Yep.
We got a little Taco Bell here. And, we will be continuing.
My computer puts out so much heat.
Yeah, for real. We will be continuing with this series. We'll be doing that soon. I think there's a short story we probably want to cover separately.
Yeah.
So we'll do that next. But we hope you enjoyed. Let us know if you're into Warhammer already, or if this makes you curious about Warhammer. Like I said, this is my first exposure to Warhammer, and I'm definitely excited for the new video games coming out. There's a couple games coming out soon this year. So it's cool. I like the whole universe and the idea that it's so big, there's so much they can do. But anyway, hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.